Welcome to World Prism. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. As December 2025 arrives, the United States faces a staggering $37 trillion national debt, a figure that has reached historic proportions and is now impossible to ignore. This mountain of debt is not just a number on a balance sheet, it's a looming crisis that threatens to reshape the nation's economic future and its role on the world stage. The sheer scale of this debt casts a long shadow over the American economy, fueling anxiety among investors, businesses, and everyday citizens. International observers are watching closely as the world's largest economy teeters on the edge of a fiscal precipice, raising questions about global stability. In response, the debt crisis has sparked a surge in protectionist trade policies. The White House insists that imposing tariffs is the only way to revive American industry, protect domestic jobs, and address decades of unbalanced trade that have left the country vulnerable to foreign competition. The administration claims that making foreign goods more expensive will protect American jobs and shrink the trade deficit, a message that resonates deeply with communities hit hardest by factory closures and the relentless march of globalization. For many, these policies offer a glimmer of hope for a more secure economic future. But these sweeping changes have consequences beyond America's borders. Canada, America's largest trading partner, now finds itself directly in the crosshairs of these new policies, threatening the very foundation of its own economy and the livelihoods of millions. The sudden imposition of tariffs has destabilized the North American trade relationship, forcing Canada to navigate a new era of uncertainty. As America grapples with its fiscal troubles, its neighbors and trading partners must adapt to a rapidly changing landscape where old alliances are tested and the future remains uncertain. In late 2025, President Trump abruptly ended all trade talks with Canada, stunning both American and Canadian officials who had been working for months to salvage the relationship. The announcement came without warning, sending shockwaves through diplomatic circles and the business community on both sides of the border. Trump cited a critical Ontario ad campaign as the final straw, claiming the ads were not just political rhetoric, but a direct attack on his administration's integrity and policies. The campaign, which had gained traction in Canadian media, was seen by the White House as an unacceptable provocation. This dramatic move followed months of escalating tariffs, 35% on Canadian goods, which had already begun to disrupt supply chains and raise prices for consumers and businesses alike. There was also a 25% tariff on non-US vehicle components, threatening the integrated auto industry that had long relied on seamless cross-border trade. And a crippling 50% tariff on steel and aluminum, which hit Canadian manufacturers especially hard, forcing some to halt production and lay off workers. The White House justified these sweeping actions by accusing Canada of failing to curb fentanyl trafficking into the United States, a charge that was hotly debated by experts and officials. Canadian officials strongly denied the allegations, calling them baseless and politically motivated, and insisted that Canada was doing everything possible to combat the opioid crisis. Many analysts and commentators saw the fentanyl accusation as a pretext for economic aggression, arguing that the real motivation was to score political points ahead of the U.S. election. The Trump administration began recasting Canada as an adversary rather than a trusted partner, a dramatic reversal from decades of close cooperation and mutual benefit. The tariffs marked a hostile shift, signaling that decades of economic partnership could be dismantled in favor of a transactional, America-first approach that prioritized short-term political gains over long-term stability. For Canada, the consequences were immediate and severe. Factories closed, workers lost their jobs, and the Canadian economy faced a sudden downturn as the U.S. prioritized domestic politics over its closest alliance. The message was clear: no nation, not even a neighbor and longtime ally, is exempt from America's new economic order. The era of predictable North American cooperation had come to an abrupt and uncertain end. Confronted with an unprecedented economic shock that sent ripples through every corner of the country, Canadians watched anxiously as breaking news flashed across city screens. The uncertainty was palpable, with business leaders, workers, and families all wondering what the future would hold. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government responded with a mix of defiance and urgency, determined to protect Canadian interests at all costs. Within hours, emergency meetings were convened, and a clear message was sent to both domestic and international audiences. Canada would not back down. Ottawa refused to be bullied, vowing that no deal is better than a bad deal. The government immediately rolled out support packages for affected industries, while also accelerating efforts to diversify trade partners and reduce reliance on the U.S. market. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, undeterred by President Trump's criticism, called for bold retaliatory measures including a 50% tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum. His tough stance resonated with Canadians, sparking rallies and protests in support of a firm response. The crisis forged a rare and powerful unity across Canada's political spectrum. Leaders from every province, regardless of party, came together in a show of solidarity, agreeing that American actions must be firmly resisted for the sake of national sovereignty. Relief efforts were quickly mobilized, focusing on protecting the auto sector, supporting Canadian farmers facing new export barriers, and safeguarding the livelihoods of metalworkers, the backbone of Canada's manufacturing economy. These workers became symbols of resilience and national pride. Canada's response blended principled defiance with pragmatic support, combining strong rhetoric with concrete action. The government's goal was clear: to weather the most significant bilateral crisis in modern history without compromising Canadian values or prosperity. In the face of adversity, the nation stood united. Canadians from all walks of life rallied together, determined not to sacrifice their sovereignty or future to American pressure, and proving that in times of crisis, Canada's true strength lies in its unity and resolve. The trade war's harshest impacts hit the auto, steel, and agricultural sectors on both sides of the border. Tariffs drove up production costs, triggered layoffs, and disrupted supply chains in manufacturing hubs like Windsor and Detroit. Canadian and American companies alike faced higher expenses, forcing cutbacks and stalling investments. Farmers lost access to key markets, while retaliatory duties escalated the pain for both countries' agricultural producers. Business groups warned that the dispute was eroding North America's competitiveness and investor confidence. Ultimately, consumers paid the price through higher costs for everyday goods. The crisis exposed the fragility of the integrated US-Canada economy, showing how quickly political decisions can unravel decades of shared prosperity. As the crisis deepened, divisions emerged among Canada's leaders over how to respond. Ontario and Alberta's premiers pushed for hardline retaliation and rapid trade diversification, while Saskatchewan's premier urged a more conciliatory approach to protect vulnerable farmers. The April 2025 summer, may koriboni par day, winnaw on the beginning of Friday on the referendum on crisis management, with Mark Carney's victory seen as a mandate for measured but firm diplomacy. Now, Carney must balance regional demands for toughness with the need to protect sectors most at risk. The central challenge: whether to escalate for leverage or de-escalate to restart talks. Success depends on forging consensus among provinces and presenting a united front to Washington. Canada's fate hinges on its ability to manage these internal tensions while confronting an unpredictable U.S. administration. Experts are divided on the future of US-Canada trade. Some, like Greg Valliere, predict the crisis will be short-lived, arguing that economic pain will force a resolution. Others recall failed predictions and warn that political motives may prolong the conflict, regardless of economic logic. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem outlines two paths: a negotiated settlement with stalled growth, or a prolonged trade war leading to deep recession and lasting damage. Most agree that the outcome depends on U.S. political calculations, whether domestic pressure outweighs the appeal of confrontation. If economic pain in key states grows, or a new crisis emerges, negotiations could resume. Until then, uncertainty reigns, with both nations facing the risk of lasting economic harm. Resolving the crisis requires a fundamental shift, starting with a mutual pause on tariffs and inflammatory rhetoric. A temporary ceasefire would allow negotiators to address core issues without immediate economic pain. Both sides must recognize their shared interests. The U.S. acknowledging the costs of tariffs, Canada engaging seriously with American concerns. Modernizing trade agreements and creating new dispute mechanisms could lay the groundwork for lasting stability. Business and civil society must pressure leaders to prioritize prosperity over confrontation. Ultimately, rebuilding trust and partnership is essential. The alternative is mutual decline. The choice between renewed cooperation and deepening conflict now rests with leaders in Washington and Ottawa.